Hi everyone and welcome along. Today I'm so excited because we are going to look at a classic rose. We're going to draw it and then we're going to paint it. It's one of the most requested flowers because it's an absolute beauty. And today's video is sponsored by Skillshare, so grab your paints and let's get started. Right everyone, this year Skillshare are launching a brand new campaign to encourage you to subscribe to something better. What's next for you in 2023? That's the question. For me, because I'm a member of Skillshare and I go and learn classes in there, I am really keen to look at new ways of making the most of my watercolour paintings, digitising the images, possibly selling them for illustrations to other people. So the class I'm looking at the moment is called Design for the Job You Want, Personal Projects to Build Your Portfolio by Alizarin Crimson. And essentially, Skillshare is just amazing for you to take greater control of your career and creative path. Whether you're me, someone who already has a business, or someone who's just starting out, it's something for everyone. Traditional work jobs these days, they're not one size fit all. And Skillshare is an amazing way to design a career that really works for you. And you can explore Skillshare for free for 1 month if you are one of the first 1,000 people to sign up by clicking the link in the episode notes below. Skillshare is sponsoring this video, which is very cool of them, and it's just it's a genuine joy I find from using their classes and just learning and taking a bit of time to just sort of sit and improve myself. So that's what I'll be doing this January, and I hope you will too, thanks to the 1 month's free trial from Skillshare. So today we are drawing and painting a rose. I've been mixing up some lovely colours. But the first thing we want to do is we want to do a bit of a drawing, because that is quite important with roses. We see lots of loose watercolour roses on YouTube, and that's really cool. And I've painted many of those, but I want to look at something a little bit more detailed today. So we've got a stem, and that is going to be crossed with a little oval here. And this is the point, this is sort of the base of the flower. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of create, this is the kind of perimeter, I guess, of the flower, so this oval. I'm basically going to draw you a cup and saucer. So here we've got the saucer, and then from here, what we're going to do is we're going to draw a cup. And from this, we're going to get the outer petals that sort of unfurl. So I'm actually going to draw the petals today. So that central point, that's the anchoring point for all your flowers, all your petals. So I'm going to draw that in, imagining they're coming from there. And then as we come up this one here, these are the petals are sort of more curled upwards, so have a petal, imagining it's coming up there, but it's going to have a nice sort of folded over top, and that lovely sort of slight frilled edge you get with roses. I'm going to have another one that's sort of unfurling outwards. We might see another petal there. And then inside we've got a sort of more tighter cup of petals. So they're going to be coming up. So from that anchor point, imagine the cup, and then where the petal is coming in. And then is it going to be sort of flapped over, folded over like that, and the cup is going to get sort of tighter and tighter, you see. So then by the point that you're in the middle, and this is where that line is very handy to remind us where the centre of this rose is. We can start now to just sort of do little petals that we're not going to see much of, just sort of overlapping with each other. And there we go. We've got quite a sort of heavily drawn rose. What I want to do now is just lightly rub out the pencil so that we're not too overloaded with heavy pencil when we come to paint this. And then what I also want to do is just to draw a leaf or two, but I'm just going to do that for the stem, and just the central line for the leaves is all I'm going to use. So we're going to begin with really nice, has a little bit of permanent rose and a bit of Alizarin Crimson, really diluted right down. And I'm also going to get a little bit of the green gold, because with a paler rose you often actually get a little bit of that yellowy green in some of the petals. So I'm going to begin with these outer petals, and I'm going to go petal by petal. I've got a size 2 brush here, and I'm angling my brush strokes so they sort of flop out, for want of a better phrase. And then I'm going to take a little bit of pink and just have that along the edge. Of course, the roses come in all sorts of colours, so you could choose any colourway you like. But for me, I'm just going to begin with this delicate pink that features some of the green gold. And you can see how there are unpainted spaces in there in the brush strokes. Now what I want to do really is try and avoid the colours bleeding into each other too much. So I might find another petal that's sort of on the outer edges. There's this one here. I know that there's not much visible. But there's also sort of ones out around the edge, even though these sort of feel like they're the more upturned areas. Or we can just sort of go slowly, be patient with it. So there we go. So this is what we call the basic wash stage. And even though it's not purely a case of simply colouring in, we're still creating direction, angle, shape with these petals by angling our brush strokes and directing our brush strokes off in certain ways. But there's plenty more detail to come, so we're not trying to achieve everything in these early petals. I'm going to up the intensity of the pink, and I'm going to look at the second layer of petals. So coming in down here, we've got this petal. But I might also give it just the tiniest bit of extra colour down in the bottom there, because by doing that, that also just conveys the sense of the depth and the darkness down in there. It's easier now to find a petal that isn't touching one from this layer. Here it's less a case of there being like a really dark depth like right down there in the flower, but I am still going to just take a little bit of colour and add it in there. So I'm just going to go round these petals and just increase the amount of colour as we go further and further into the middle. And yeah, we'll get to the point where we've done all our basic washes of the flower. So we've got our rose all painted in, and you can see the colour gets a little sort of deeper as we go in there, and the different sections have been painted in these different colours, but it's still fairly pale across the board. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get a bit of Alizarin Crimson, and I'm actually going to take a little bit, just a little bit of Paynes Grey. Maybe a little bit more. You just got to go cautiously with that Paynes Grey because it is really very dark. And now I am going to find areas, and I'm going to use my 2/10 brush. I'm now going to look for the underside, the sort of shadier underside, and use this dark colour as a way in which I can sort of crisp up and define that frilled edge there. And then I clean off my brush and I just draw the colour downwards. So you have to work quite swiftly here. And then I get a slightly more concentrated bit, and I just want to drop that in where it's still wet. And just create that lovely bit of darkness. So we've got two sort of stages here. So we find the underside, get a bit blended in, and then just a little bit more of that utter darkness there. And then I quite like it when you get a few of these sort of brush strokes. It's not all just completely smoothly blended in. So we're not going to do this for every single one, but where we sort of saw a bit of shade before, just enhance that a little bit. You don't always have to use the second sort of super dark bit, but I really love that quite cold colour. We're still trying to work just in the dry section, so if you've painted something immediately next door, you'll want to just wait for it to dry. And whilst I'm doing this as well, and the ones where I'm not too worried about too much darkness, what I can also do is add in just a few extra little sort of lines of texture. Even though a rose petal isn't obviously ridged or lined, it does have a subtle texture to it. So if I clean off my brush and just allow that colour to move a little bit. I can do that on a few of them. And then also just getting the sense that it's really curling over there. Just to soften that edge with a curve going over the edge. I think the most effective useful bit of advice I can give you when painting a rose is not to get overwhelmed by the piece as a whole, but once you've sort of broken it down into these little sections, it just means that you can focus on that one petal in that moment and go, right, what does this petal need? And then you can paint that in, really focus on it, because all you're doing is waiting for other petals to dry. And the other thing is if you do have a photo or even the real thing in front of you, then you're going to be so much more successful from actually studying what's really going on in front of you. Now, I've not forgotten about those petals out here. What we're going to do is we're going to take a bit of this and we're going to bring it in. So I've got my size 2 brush back. Just using it in a nice dilute fashion again. Doing that very dilute wash over the top. And then just a little bit more colour. But I'm not going all in with the really deep dark colour. So yeah, we're just going to get these elements painted in and then we can see if there's any more detail we want. So this is looking rather lovely now, and we're going to move on to the stem, but we still need these dark plummy colours because they feature quite heavily in the plant foliage as well, which is quite interesting. So I'm going to begin by adding some burnt sienna into this. And I'm going to start by painting in the stem. Now that's very brown at the moment. I want it a bit deeper and darker. So I'm going to get my Paynes Grey. And I'm also just going to get some pure Alizarin Crimson in there. Lovely, that's what I want. A few little sort of thorny spots there. And now the green is going to be brought in. Quite a thick stem. Now underneath we do have sepals. We're not going to see a huge amount of them, but we might just see one or two, so they can just be depicted with a little bit of the green and then adding a little bit of this Paynes Grey. But the leaves, well, I'm going to begin with the pinky colour coming off the stem with my size 2 brush, just sort of allow it to bleed in. And I'm going to paint in, actually I'm going to take a larger brush. I'm going to use my size 6 and create these nice leaf shapes. But then I'm going to add in a little bit of Sap Green mixed in with a bit of Paynes Grey, and I'm going to create this edge, this serrated edge. Must be done fast while that leaf is still wet, because it's going to be able to blend in. And I'm just going to sort of paint the second one in. And it's funny because this really is quite loose in style, but it works. And when we rub out the pencil on the rose, that loosens the rose up quite substantially as well. Just a little bit down the middle there. So I'm just going to place in the other leaves, and then we can rub out all the pencil and do the last little bits. So everything's dry and the pencil's been rubbed out, and that rose is just really lifted off the page rather beautifully. So now we're going to just add a little bit of more detail to the leaves, just to bring them up to the level of detail of the rose. That's an interesting point actually, when you're painting something like this and you've focused in tons on the rose and then the other things are a bit loose. It can be a thematic choice, a stylistic choice, but it is good to maybe try and tie together the details. So what I've got here is my rigger brush, and I'm just using its wonderful long languid bristles to send a few leaf lines up and down the leaves. I used to really resist any kind of leaf detail. I used to think it was too heavy and would ruin things, but then I found the rigger brush. I felt like it changed my life. Well, it is pretty brilliant, I must say. Okay, that's looking really nice. So I'm really happy with that. The only thing left that we can do is just go one last time into the rose with a little bit of a detailed brush just in that central area there, just adding a few Alizarin Crimson extras. So I'm just adding in an extra petal there, maybe an extra little one there, and maybe just helping us just define where some of these overlaps have come. Don't overdo it though, she says, as she potentially overdoes it. And that is where we're going to leave it. So there we have a lovely rose in some detail for you. Thanks so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed that one. And don't forget, thanks to our sponsor Skillshare, the first 1,000 people to click the link in the episode notes get a free month of Skillshare to subscribe to something better for 2023. Okay, until next time, bye!